The cold, dark space near Pluto was never busy. For a long time, it was quiet, just rocks and ice. But now, it was full of ships. These ships were not from Earth. They were from the Galactic Consensus. They were sleek and silver, shaped like leaves or tears. Their engines made no sound. They glowed with soft blue light. This was an observation fleet. They watched the single yellow star and its planets. They watched the third planet Earth. For 50 years, they had watched. They had seen the wars, the pollution, the struggle. They had also seen the satellites, the space stations, the clumsy rockets. To the Consensus, humanity was a loud, bright, messy child. A child who was about to be told it could never leave its room. On the flagship, the Eternal Witness, Ambassador Nari looked at the data screen. Her face was calm. She was from a species called the Valen. They were tall, with gray skin and large, dark eyes. They valued peace and order above all. She felt a small sadness. Her job today was not pleasant. She had to deliver a final ruling. Their energy signatures are still chaotic, a science officer said to her. Their fastest propulsion is primitive ion drive. Their attempts at faster-than-light theory are incorrect. They lack cohesive understanding. The diagnosis stands: non-viable, pre-contact civilization. Risk of societal collapse upon technological shock is 100%. Nari nodded. The diagnosis was a death sentence for a species' star-faring dreams. It meant they would be placed under a permanent quarantine field. They would live out their existence in their solar system, unaware a galaxy of life existed just beyond their sight. It was a kindness, the Consensus believed. A protection. Open a channel to the main human orbital platform, Nari said. It is time. On Earth, and on its moon and Mars, the best human scientists and leaders were waiting. They knew something was happening. For decades, strange probes had been seen. Unexplained energy readings. Today, all their telescopes were pointed at the edge of the solar system. They saw the alien fleet. They didn't need a translation to understand its purpose. It was a jury dot in a large room in Seoul. A man named Min-soo watched the main screen. He was not a scientist. He was a soldier. His face was hard, like stone. He wore the plain uniform of the United Earth Defense Fleet, a fleet that existed only on paper and in hidden shipyards. Are they ready? He asked quietly. A younger woman next to him, Hannah, checked her own datapad. It didn't show normal readings. It showed gravitational twists and quantum particle densities. All 7 ships are holding position behind the sun's gravitational lens. The field is stable. They see nothing. Min-soo allowed himself a small breath. For 100 years, a secret project had run. It was not in big labs. It was in basements, in abandoned mines, in old warehouses. When the world's best physics said no, a few stubborn minds asked, why not? They found a different path. A path so strange, the rest of the galaxy had never even looked for it. They called it axiomatic persuasion. Most people called it madness. Tell Jinwoo to stand by, Min-soo said. Jinwoo sat in his cockpit. It was not sleek. It was full of old-style switches and physical screens. His ship, the Badger, was a heavy, angular thing. It looked like a flying bunker. It was one of many in the hangar of the UFS Dauntless, the first and largest human interstellar ship. It was hidden, along with its sister ships, not by a cloak, but by a different kind of trick. Jinwoo's hands were steady on the controls. He thought of his grandfather, who had worked on the first crude reality anchors. He thought of the stories. The galaxy thought humans were babies. They were about to meet teenagers who had learned to pick the lock on the universe's back door. All pilots, this is command. Event imminent. Remember your protocols. Do not engage unless fired upon. Your primary role is observation and field stability. The voice of Captain Minsu was calm in his ear. Shinwoo clicked his mic. Understood. Back on the Eternal Witness, Nari began to speak. Her message was broadcast to every major human receiver. It was translated by computers into every language. People of Earth, we are the Galactic Consensus. We have observed your world for many of your years. We see your spirit. We see your curiosity. But our laws are clear. A species must reach a stable, unified understanding of universal laws before contact. Your science is fractured. Your theories lead to dead ends. Your attempts at faster-than-light travel would only tear your ships apart. On Earth, people listened in homes and in streets. A great silence fell over the world. To introduce you to the greater galaxy now would cause your culture to collapse. The shock would be too great. Therefore, with great regret, the consensus must declare your civilization non-viable for contact. A murmur of despair rose on Earth. We will place a gentle energy field around your solar system. It will allow light and energy from your sun to pass, but it will prevent any travel beyond. You will be safe. You will have your world. It is the kindest path. Nari paused, letting the translation finish. She expected cries of anger. She expected pleas. She saw only stunned silence on the faces of the human delegates on her screen. Then, one of the human scientists, a woman named Hana, who was linked from Seoul, spoke. Her voice was not sad. It was curious. Ambassador Nari, Hana said, thank you for your message. Before you activate this field, may we ask a question? Our sensors are poor, but we are detecting an unusual quantum field fluctuation near your fifth ship, the one you call the Observer's Mercy. Are you conducting an experiment? Nari was confused. She looked at her science officer. The officer checked his instruments. No experiment, Ambassador. Local space is normal. Their sensors are mistaken. It is to be expected. Hannah's face on the screen showed a small smile. I see. Our mistake. It must be a reflection from your own engine fields. But it looks, for a moment, like the signature of a localized reality dissonance. Almost as if something is trying to appear where it shouldn't be. A chill went down Nari's spine. The term reality dissonance was not a human term. It was a high-level consensus concept. What are you saying? Nari asked, her calm voice gaining a sharp edge. On the main view screen of the Eternal Witness, space itself behind the human's communication satellite seemed waver. It was like looking at a reflection in a pond when a stone is dropped. The stars blurred and stretched out then. They parted. It was not a flashy arrival. There was no roar of engines, no burst of warp light. It was silent. One moment, there was empty space. The next, there was a ship. It was massive. It was not sleek. It was blocky, armored, and gray. It had no glowing engines. It had only thick, heavy plates and large, dark ports. It looked less like a ship and more like a fortress that had decided to go for a walk. Letters on its side read, UFS Dauntless. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Minsu stood up from his chair. He looked at the main screen, which showed the beautiful alien fleet of the Consensus. He nodded to his communication officer. Send a wideband signal. All frequencies. Simple message. The officer nodded. A voice, Minsu's voice, clear and steady, filled every speaker on the Consensus ships and every receiver on Earth. Galactic Consensus. This is Captain Minsu of the United Earthship Dauntless. We appreciate your concern, but we will be handling our own travel plans from now on. On the Eternal Witness, all the screens flashed with warnings. But the warnings made no sense. They said things like mass sensor failure and optical illusion probability, high, and object classification, impossible. Ambassador Nari stared at the monstrous, impossible human ship hanging in the void. The ship that her technology insisted could not be there. Her mouth was slightly open. The perfect, ordered words of her verdict were gone. All she could think was one thing, a thought that echoed in the minds of every alien on every ship. How? A silence deeper than space filled the void between the fleets. On the bridge of the UFS Dauntless, the crew worked with quiet focus. They had practiced for this moment 1,000 times in simulators. The reality was stranger. Outside the thick viewports, the alien ships of the Galactic Consensus hung like frozen works of art. They looked delicate next to the heavy, angular human vessel. Captain Minsu stood with his hands behind his back. He watched the main screen, which showed the alien flagship, the Eternal Witness. He could almost feel their shock. He knew their sensors were screaming at them. His own science officer, Hana, was reading the results aloud. "Their active scans are hitting us," she said, her voice calm. "But they're not getting a coherent reading. Their systems rely on standard quantum field signatures. Our hull is disagreeing with those fields. To their eyes, we are a maybe, a probability." Engineer Day chuckled from his station. He was a round-faced man who loved his work. "They're looking for a song, and we're giving them static. Poor guys must have a headache." On the Eternal Witness, chaos was a quiet, professional kind. Ambassador Nari gripped the rail in front of her. Her large, dark eyes were fixed on the blocky human ship. Her science officers were speaking in low, urgent tones. "The object is there. Visual confirmation is absolute. But mass readings fluctuate. Energy signature is a non-pattern. It does not use a warp core. It does not use a gravity drive. It is sitting in space while arguing with local physics. This is not technology. This is a paradox." Nari took a slow breath. "Hail them. Again. Use the universal first contact protocols. All frequencies." A signal was sent. On the Dauntless, the communication officer looked at Minsu. "They're asking for dialogue, Captain." "Standard package." "Put them on screen," Minsu said. The main viewer changed. It showed the interior of the alien ship. It was all soft curves and gentle light. Ambassador Nari stood in the center. Her gray skin seemed paler. Behind her, other Valen moved with worried grace. "Human vessel," Nari began, her voice striving for its former calm. "You have committed a surprising action. Your presence here violates consensus edicts. You must explain yourself. What is the nature of this illusion?" Minsu gave a small, polite nod. "Ambassador Nari, this is no illusion. This is the UFS Dauntless, first of its class. We are here as a courtesy. We received your message about the quarantine. We are declining the offer." Nari blinked. "You cannot decline. The science is clear. Your species is not ready." "Your science is clear," Minsu corrected gently. "Ours took a different path." Before Nari could answer, a new voice crackled over the fleet-wide comms. It was from another consensus ship, the Vigilant Blade. It was a military vessel, sleek and armed. Its commander, a species more rigid than the Valen, did not sound confused. He sounded angry. "Ambassador, this is a trick. A primitive hologram powered by their planetary reactors. They seek to frighten us with shadows. I will prove it." "Commander, do not engage." Nari said, but it was too late. The Vigilant Blade moved. It was fast, like a silver fish darting through water. It positioned itself between the Dauntless and the rest of the consensus fleet. A single forward-mounted emitter glowed a bright, dangerous blue. "It's a warning shot," Hannah reported, her fingers flying over her console. "High-energy plasma bolt, designed to vaporize a small asteroid. It's targeted to pass 50 meters from our bow. All hands, brace for—" Min-Su began, then stopped. He looked at Day. "Engineer?" Day was smiling at his screen. "Oh, this is perfect. A nice, clean, coherent energy packet. Just what we needed for a demo. Field is ready, Captain." The bolt fired. It was a brilliant lance of blue-white light, tearing through the dark. It shot across space, straight for the Dauntless. Every alien sensor tracked it. On Earth, people held their breath. Jin Woo, sitting in his cockpit in the Dauntless hangar, watched on his monitor. He didn't brace. He just watched. The bolt reached a point 1 kilometer from the human ship's thick hull. Then it began to change. It didn't hit a shield. There was no flash of impact. Instead, the tight, focused beam of energy seemed to loosen. It frayed at the edges, like a rope coming untwisted. The brilliant blue light softened, spreading out into a cloud of harmless, shimmering colors. Reds, greens, and yellows danced in space for a moment. Before fading into nothingness, the silence returned. On the vigilant blade, the commander stared. His weapons officer was shouting. "Energy dispersion. 100%. No contact. No shield signature detected." The bolt just dissolved. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Day let out a happy sigh. Beautiful. Like watching ice melt. They put all that energy into one neat idea. We just introduced a few other ideas to it. Got it chatting. By the time it reached us, it had forgotten what it was supposed to do. Captain Min-Su looked back at the screen when Nari's face was frozen in shock. "As I said, Ambassador, a different path." Nari found her voice. It was a whisper. "How?" Min-Su gestured to Hannah. "My science officer can explain the basics. In terms you might understand." Hannah straightened up. She looked young, but her eyes were sharp. "You see the universe as a set of finished laws. Fixed rules. Your technology works by following these rules very, very well. You push against the walls, but you never question that the walls are real." She paused, bringing up a simple diagram on her screen. It showed a wave of energy hitting a messy, complex net. We started from a different question. What if the laws are not fixed? What if they are more like habits? Strong, old habits, but habits all the same. Our technology doesn't push the walls. It talks to the space inside the walls. It suggests that maybe, for a little while, things could be a bit different. Your plasma bolt was a very loud, very simple shout. We surrounded it with a gentler, more complicated conversation. It got distracted. Nari listened. The words made a terrible, impossible sense. It was science that sounded like philosophy. It was technology that worked like a story. "You persuade reality?" "In a way," Hannah said. "It's not easy. It takes enormous power to be that persuasive. And it only works locally for a short time. Our ship isn't faster than light. It just convinces a point of space that it is already at its destination. It's messy. It's inefficient. Your engineers would hate it." Nari looked at her own science officer, who was frantically studying the new data from the human ship. The officer looked up, his face a mask of awe and horror. "They are telling the truth, Ambassador. Their power signature is massive, but it is not driving engines. It is powering. Field generators that create localized axiomatic drift. They are making reality flexible around them." The weight of it settled on Nari. Humanity was not primitive. They were something else. Something the consensus had never imagined. They were not breaking the laws of physics. They were finding loopholes in a conversation the universe forgot it was having. Captain Min Su's voice was calm and firm. The United Earth Fleet has no desire for conflict. We did not come to fight. We came to tell you that we are here. Your verdict on our viability is based on information that is incomplete. We are withdrawing to our own space near Mars. We invite you, Ambassador Nari, and a small team of your scientists, to visit the Dauntless. See for yourselves. Then we can have a new conversation. The screen went dark, returning to a view of the stars. The blocky human ship began to move. It didn't turn. The space in front of it seemed to gather, like water before a ship's bow, and the massive vessel slid forward. It moved smoothly, silently, leaving no energy trail. It was an impossible sight. Nari stood on her silent bridge. The order and certainty of her world had just cracked. The humans had not arrived with a better weapon. They had arrived with a new idea. And as she watched the impossible ship glide away, she knew the universe would never be the same. The journey to the human base near Mars was a quiet one. The Consensus shuttle, a small, elegant craft, flew behind the massive bulk of the UFS Dauntless. Ambassador Nari sat with two of her top scientists. They watched the human ship through the viewport. It did not look like it was flying. It looked like it was insisting that space move out of its way. Inside the Dauntless, the mood was busy but calm. Crew members in simple gray uniforms moved through corridors that were all sharp corners and exposed piping. There were no soft lights or gentle curves. Everything was functional. It felt less like a starship and more like a submarine from old Earth stories. Captain Min Su waited in the main hangar bay. The air was cold and smelled of metal and ozone. Around him, heavy fighter craft like Jinwu's Badger sat parked, their surfaces scratched and worn. This was not a showpiece fleet. This was a tool that had been used. A ramp extended from the Consensus shuttle with a soft hiss. Ambassador Nari stepped down, followed by her scientists. They wore light, form-fitting suits that shimmered. They looked around the hangar, their eyes wide. The sheer, brute practicality of it was shocking. "Ambassador Nari," Min Su said, giving a short nod. "Welcome aboard." "Captain," Nari replied. Her voice was steady, but her eyes took in every detail. "Your vessel is notable." "It does the job?" Min Su said. "This way, please." He led them through the ship. The humans they passed nodded, but did not stop working. Nari saw a young woman rewiring a panel with confident hands. She saw two men carrying a heavy crate marked spare field coils. There was no ceremony, only purpose. They arrived at a room called the Observation Lounge. It had a large window looking out at the red curve of Mars. In the distance, the other human ships were visible, each as blocky as the Dauntless. The room had a simple table and chairs. Hana and Engineer Day were waiting for them. "Please sit," Min Su said. Nari and her scientists sat. One of the scientists, a Valan named Korax, could not hide his curiosity. He held a small scanner in his hand. He kept looking at it and then at the humans, his brow furrowed. "Your scanner won't work well in here," they said kindly. "Too much background persuasion. It's trying to read 5 different versions of reality at once." Korax slowly put the scanner down. "It is most uncomfortable, like a noise in the mind." "You get used to it," Hana said. She offered them simple cups of water. "Your biology is compatible with ours in basic ways. The water is clean." Nari took a cup but did not drink. "Captain, we must understand. Your demonstration? It defies the foundational laws of the Consensus. A plasma bolt cannot just unmake itself. Energy must go somewhere." Min Su looked at Hana. She leaned forward. "It does go somewhere," Hana explained. "Just not where you expect." Think of your plasma bolt as a single perfect note played on a flute. Very clear, very strong. Our field generators are like an entire orchestra warming up at once. All the notes, all the sounds, all at the same time, right next to your flute. She paused, trying to find the right words. When your perfect note enters our messy cloud of sound, it gets lost. It becomes part of the noise. The energy is still there. It's just not organized into a bolt anymore. It's become heat, light, random motion. It's scattered. Korax shook his head. That requires manipulating quantum states on a macro scale with intentional randomness. It is chaos engineering. It should be impossible to control. Day laughed. Oh, it's plenty chaotic. That's the trick. We don't control the bolt. We just make the space around it so opinionated that the bolt can't remember its job. We're not smart enough to destroy your technology. So we make everything around it really dumb and loud for a second. The alien scientists stared. The concept was insulting to their intelligence, yet the result was undeniable. Nari set her cup down. This persuasion, how did you discover it? Our models show your species was decades away from standard warp theory. Minsu's face grew solemn. We were, and then your probes arrived. 50 years ago. We saw them. We knew we were not alone. The world's governments panicked. They poured money into traditional warp drives, gravity engines. It all failed. We hit a wall. He looked out at Mars, but in secret, a few people looked at the wall differently. They were not the top scientists. They were the outsiders, the ones who asked the wrong questions. A physicist in Seoul named Dr. Lee, my grandfather, was one. He said, if the universe says no, perhaps we are not asking the right question in the right way. They started with nonsense math, with failed experiments. They looked at the accidents, the anomalies that other labs threw away. Hana continued the story. They found that under certain conditions, with enough power focused not on pushing, but on questioning, the constants of a small area would wobble. Just a little. For a billionth of a second. It was a glitch. Everyone else saw a dead end. They saw a door. It took 3 generations, Minzu said, his voice low. In hidden places. With scavenged parts. While the world above prayed for a miracle from the stars, we built our own miracle in the dark. Not because we were smarter than you, because we had nowhere else to look. The room was quiet. Nari understood now. The consensus had watched humanity struggle with the right path. They had seen the failures. They had marked them as unviable. All the while, humanity had quietly, stubbornly, dug a tunnel under the path entirely. Your offer to visit, Nari said slowly. It is not just for show. You want something. Minsu nodded. Information. Your database on local space. You have maps, surveys. You know the galaxy. We can barely see past our own sun without getting a headache from our own engines. We are asking for the guidebook. In return, we will give you full access to our axiomatic principles. The math, the theory. Such as it is. Korax gasped. You would give this away? Why not? Day shrugged. It's not like you can use it. Your whole way of thinking is too neat. It would take your scientists a century to learn how to think sloppy enough to make it work. It's a trade. Your ordered knowledge for our messy truth. Nari looked at her scientists. They were stunned. The most valuable technological secret in the galaxy, offered freely. It was an act of either supreme confidence or madness. There is another reason, Hana said softly. She pulled up a star map on a table screen. It was a consensus map, beautiful and detailed. She pointed to a system about 20 light years away. This system, Your files mark it with a warning. A quantum flux cascade, a natural disaster where physics itself is breaking down. You have a colony there that you are evacuating. You believe it is doomed. Nari felt a chill. Yes, the world of Collier. The cascade is unstoppable. It is like a wound in reality. We can only watch and save who we can. Min-Su looked at the map, his jaw tight. Your science says it is unstoppable. Ours might have a different opinion. We would like to see. We would like to try. The proposal hung in the air. It was impossible. To try and fix a breaking universe with a technology that argued with it? It was like trying to put out a star with a cup of water. Yet, as Nari looked at the determined faces of these humans, at their ugly, powerful ship, she remembered the plasma bolt dissolving into harmless light. She remembered the word her scientist had used, paradox. You are not asking for permission, Nari stated. No, Captain Min-Su said. We are asking if you would like to come and watch. The world of Collier was dying. From the viewport of the Eternal Witness, it was a terrible and beautiful sight. The planet was a pale blue marble, but a large portion of its surface was stained with a shimmering, sickly violet light. This was the quantum flux cascade. It was not fire or storm. It was reality itself coming undone. Space around the planet twisted and pulsed. Sensors showed that the laws of physics there changed from moment to moment. Gravity, light speed, atomic bonds, all of it was unreliable. A vast evacuation fleet hovered at a safe distance. Sleek consensus ships flitted down to the planet's surface, collecting the last of the colonists. The mood was one of solemn grief. The cascade was a known cosmic tragedy. You could not fight it. You could only run. Then the human ships arrived. They came in their silent, impossible way. Space near the evacuation fleet rippled, and the blocky, gray forms of the UFS Dauntless and its 6 sister ships slid into view. They looked utterly out of place. They were not graceful. They looked like stones thrown into a pond of swans. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the mood was tense but focused. Captain Min-Su watched the dying planet. Hana studied the sensor data, which was a mess of contradictions. It's worse than their reports, Hana said, her voice tight. The field instability is propagating. It's not just on the surface. It's spreading into the upper atmosphere. Their evacuation ships are having to navigate through random gravity pockets. On a view screen, Ambassador Nari's face appeared. She was on the Eternal Witness. Her calm was gone, replaced by a deep worry. Captain Min-Su. The final shuttles are lifting off now. There is nothing more to be done. The cascade is entering a final, volatile stage. You must withdraw to a safe distance. We didn't come to watch, Ambassador, Min-Su said. We came to work. Hannah Day, are the anchors ready? Engineer Day, sweating slightly at his console, gave a thumbs up. All 7 ships are synced. Field projectors are hot. It's going to be one heck of a conversation in there. The plan was simple, and to the consensus scientists, it was insane. The human ships would not attack the cascade. They would not try to seal it with energy. Instead, they would fly into the edges of the unstable region and deploy their reality anchors. They would try to persuade the unraveling physics to calm down, to remember its habits. Jinwoo, Min-Su said, your squadron will fly escort. Monitor the field boundaries. If the anchors cause a recoil, you get our ships out. In his cockpit, Jinwoo checked his systems. Understood, Captain. We are ready. The consensus fleet watched in disbelief as the human vessels turned and began to move, not away from the cascade, but toward it. A wave of alarm spread through their comms channels. They are committing suicide. Their primitive hulls will be torn apart by the first gravity shear. Do they not understand? The Dauntless led the way, plunging into the shimmering violet haze at the edge of the cascade. The view on its bridge twisted. The stars outside smeared into long, rainbow-colored lines. The ship shuddered as conflicting forces pulled at it. "Anchor one, away!" They shouted out from the belly of the Dauntless. A massive cylindrical device was ejected. It looked like a giant metal log covered in crude spiraling coils. It fired retro-rockets and planted itself in the empty space. It began to glow with a dull brownish light, a light that held no beauty, only a stubborn, earthy solidity. Across the fleet, the other human ships did the same, dropping their anchors in a wide ring around the worst of the cascade. "Activating axiomatic field," Hannah said. She pressed a sequence of keys. "Broadcasting stability narrative." To the consensus sensors, nothing happened. No surge of power. No blast of energy. But the human ships began to vibrate. A deep, subaudible hum traveled through their hulls, a sound that felt wrong to the listening aliens. On the Eternal Witness, Science Officer Korax stared at his instruments in confusion. "They are broadcasting, but it is not a coherent signal. It is a modulated chaos. White noise mixed with random probability matrices. It is nonsense." The cascade reacted. The violet light pulsed angrily. A wave of spatial distortion, like a heat ripple, shot out from the planet and slammed into the Dauntless. The ship groaned. Alarms blared. "Port field coil is overheating." An engineer yelled. "Compensate," Minsu ordered, holding on to his chair. "Keep the narrative stable. Don't argue with it, just talk louder." The human ships held their positions. Their anchors glowed brighter, emitting their stubborn, unexciting field. It was not a shield. It was more like a dense, logical fog. The wild, creative insanity of the cascade crashed into the boring, persistent story the humans were telling. Jingwu flew his Badger along the edge of the field. He saw space itself warping. One moment, his sensors showed a clear path. The next, they screamed about an asteroid that wasn't there. He flew on instinct, trusting his eyes more than his machines. "Something's happening," Hannah called out, her voice rising with hope. On the main viewer, the violent, swirling violet light at the center of their anchor ring began to change. It didn't vanish. It became less frantic. The colors softened from a poisonous violet to a gentle lavender. The shocking twists of light smoothed into gentle waves. "It's listening," Day whispered, awed that the cascade was not being defeated. It was being calmed. The human field was offering a simpler, more tedious reality. A reality where atoms stayed together and gravity pulled in one direction. The chaotic magic of the unraveling universe was getting bored and settling down. For 10 long minutes, the human ships held, shaking and shuddering as they poured power into their anchors. The deep hum was the only sound on their bridges. Then it was over. The violet light faded, not with a bang, but with a sigh. It dissipated into a harmless, glowing mist that slowly scattered into space. The space around Collier was still. The planet's pale blue surface was visible again, scarred but whole. The laws of physics for now were back to their old, predictable habits. On the Dauntless, the crew slumped at their stations, exhausted. Smoke drifted from a console. Everyone was sweating. On the Eternal Witness, there was no sound at all. Every alien, from Ambassador Nari to the lowest technician, simply stared. They had witnessed the impossible. A quantum flux cascade, a natural disaster of cosmic scale, had just been soothed, like calming a wild animal with a quiet voice. Nari's screen lit up. It was Captain Minsu. He looked tired. There was a smudge of soot on his cheek. "Ambassador," he said, his voice hoarse, "the area is stable. We recommend you send your science teams to check." The anchors will keep the field steady for a few days. Your colony. The people can go home. Nari could not speak. She could only nod. Behind her, she heard Korax begin to weep. Not from sadness, but from a profound shock to his entire understanding of existence. The human ships, scarred and smoking, began their slow, silent withdrawal from the orbit of Collier. They did not look like glorious saviors. They looked like tired workers coming home after a long, hard job. As they passed the consensus evacuation fleet, a new signal went out. It was not from any commander. It was from every ship. It was a simple, repeating tone on a universal frequency, a tone that, in 100 species cultures, meant the same thing. It was the sound of applause. The great chamber of the galactic consensus was silent. It was a vast, circular space, with tiers of seating rising up into shadows. In it sat representatives from thousands of starfaring species. Some were gaseous, some crystalline, many were bipedal like humans. Their images were projected from across the galaxy. They were the rulers, the thinkers, the oldest minds in known space. Today, they all watched one thing. On the floor of the chamber stood two figures. One was Ambassador Nari, her gray skin and tall frame a familiar sight. Next to her, looking small and solid in his simple gray uniform, was Captain Min-Su. Behind them, a holographic image showed the UFS Dauntless, hanging in orbit above the consensus homeworld. It was an ugly, beautiful, impossible thing. For days, the reports had flooded in. The rescue of Collier was not a rumor. It was a verified fact. Sensor logs, visual records, the testimonies of 100 scientists all confirmed it. Humanity had done the impossible. They had not done it with superior force. They had done it with a different idea. The High Speaker, a being of shimmering light, addressed the chamber. Its voice was like wind chimes. The evidence is before us. A new sentience has entered the galactic stage. Not through the gate we built, but through a wall we declared solid. We must now decide what this means. One of the elder species, the Grovel, whose voice was a slow grind of stone, spoke. They are anomalies. Their technology is instability given form. It is dangerous. It mocks the laws that bind the universe. They must be contained, studied for safety. A murmur of agreement came from some quarters. Nari stepped forward. Her voice, amplified, was clear. Contain them? How? You saw what they did at Collier. They did not break a law. They started a different conversation. Their power is not in destruction, but in persuasion. Can you contain a new thought? Captain Min-Su looked up at the thousands of alien faces, a sea of strange eyes and unfamiliar shapes. He felt no fear, only a strange kind of patience. He had come here with a request, not a demand. May I speak? He asked. His voice was rough. Human. The chamber fell silent again. The High Speaker pulsed. The floor is yours, Captain of Earth. Min-Su did not move from his spot. He spoke plainly, as if to his own crew. You call us an anomaly. You are right. We are. For 100 years, we looked at the stars and saw a door you had opened. We tried to build a key. We failed. We are not as elegant as you. Not as ordered. He paused, letting the translation fill the vast space. So, we looked at the wall around the door. We found it was not as solid as everyone said. It was made of ideas. And ideas can be discussed. A ripple of something not quite understanding, but curiosity went through the chamber. We do not have a better fleet. We have a different tool. We are not here to conquer. What would we conquer? We can barely navigate your star maps without getting a headache. You have built a beautiful, delicate garden of stars. We are not gardeners. We are. The people you call when the fence is broken and something strange is coming through the woods. He gestured to the image of the dauntless. We are stubborn. We are messy. We are loud. We argue with reality until it gets tired and gives us a place to sit. That is all we have to offer. He turned, and a new holographic image appeared. It was a star chart, but not of political boundaries or trade routes. It was a map of anomalies. It showed the quantum flux cascade at Collier. It showed the silent zone where sensors went dead. It showed the gravity reefs that trapped ships. It showed a dozen other places where the universe did not follow its own rules, places the consensus avoided, marked with warning beacons. This, Minsu said, pointing to the map, is what interests us. Your problems. The places your science says no. We would like to go there. Not to claim them. To talk to them. To see if our kind of nonsense can make sense of them. The proposal was so unexpected, so utterly bizarre, that the chamber was struck silent. They expected a demand for a seat of power, for territory, for resources. Instead, this human was asking for permission to go to the most dangerous, useless places in the galaxy that the Grovel representative rumbled. You wish to be custodians of chaos? Minsu almost smiled. We wish to be useful, in our own way. In return, we ask for two things. One, the data from these places, what you have observed. Two, that you share with us what you learn from our methods, a trade of knowledge, not an alliance, a collaboration. He looked at Nari, then back up at the assembly. You declared us non-viable. You are not wrong by your rules. We were a dead end. So we turned around and found a new path. We are not your future, but we might be a useful friend for the problems you don't want to touch. The high speaker pulsed, its light swirling thoughtfully. The image on the floor changed. It showed the human ships at Collier, holding fast against the storm. It showed the plasma bolt dissolving into light. It showed the tired, soot-stained face of Engineer Day laughing after the cascade was calmed. The galaxy had seen power before. It had seen wisdom and grace and terrible weapons. It had never seen this, a species that faced the impossible and simply refused to accept it. The high speaker's voice chimed once more. The consensus has always sought order. We believed it was the highest state. Perhaps we have forgotten that order must sometimes be negotiated. Captain Minsu, your request is granted. A collaborative of inquiry will be formed. You will have your maps. We will watch. And we will learn. It was not a victory cheer that filled the chamber, but a deep, resonant hum of contemplation, a sound of 1,000 worldviews quietly expanding. Later, in orbit, Minsu stood on the bridge of the Dauntless. The ship was being repaired. The smell of welding was in the air. Jingwu and his pilots were debriefing. Hana and Day were already studying the first data packets from the consensus, arguing happily over a subspatial rift listed on the anomaly map. On a small view screen, Earth was visible, blue and green and swirling with clouds. The news was spreading across the planet. They were not quarantined. They were not alone. They were something new. Hana came to stand beside him. They gave us the keys to the haunted houses of the galaxy, she said. Good, Minsu replied. We have a lot of questions to ask. He looked out at the stars, not as barriers anymore, but as endless series of strange, beautiful, stubborn problems. And for the first time in a long time, the universe felt less like a locked room and more like a conversation that was just beginning.